And welcome to What Women Must Know. Thank you for joining me once again. This show is every Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, and I've been reflecting back how long I have been on this program. I've been on this program as long as Progressive Radio Network has been on air, and I actually don't know exactly how many years that is. I think it's close to 15. I have no sense of time, so I'm really bad with dates, but it's been a wonderful opportunity all these years to be on this program and to have the chance to engage in wonderful conversations with such inspiring people. I learn, I know all of you who've been listening are learning as well, and that's really the purpose of the show. It's to empower you with truthful information so you can make the most informed decisions possible regarding your health and well-being. If you are listening for the first time, or you may have listened before but never really bothered to take the next step, which is either you can go to my website, which is What Women Must Know, like me there, because I post all of the archive shows that I do, so you can access them there. Or if you'd like to go to my website, Dr. Cheryl Selman, drCherylSelman.com, and opt in there, then I get to send all the archive shows out to you, and you get them arriving in your inbox, and they'll be good to go. I do want to also mention that I have two programs on Progressive Radio Network. One is What Women Must Know, but the other one is called The Love Code, and that's every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And that show is more of a spiritual show. It's a great opportunity with the guests that I have, spiritual teachers of all sorts of persuasions, and people who are sharing their healing miracles and their spiritual journeys. So it's a very uplifting program that I trust will inspire you to know the possibilities that exist to create the health and the life that you want, and to stay connected to the true power that you have within you. So hope you will join me there. And again, if you just like me over on my Facebook page or opt into Dr. Cheryl Selman, then all these shows will be sent to you. You have easy access to them, and lots of other great information, by the way. So one other announcement I just want to say, because time is running short, I am taking a group of people to Bhutan, and I have mentioned this before. This is going to be a truly profound experience, and it's October 19th through 31st. It's 12 days. We're going to experience all that Bhutan has to offer us in 12 amazing days, from the land, the beautiful environment, to the culture, to the spirituality, to the arts, to the healing arts, to the sports. They're renowned for their archery, to hot stone baths. We're going to have talk by Buddhist monks and astrologers, and experience festivals that happen only twice a year in Bhutan that are just the most amazing and colorful and profound teaching festivals. The dance is a way of passing on oral tradition of the deep spiritual realm. So anyway, it's going to be awesome. And the reason that I'm mentioning this is the last time I will be mentioning it, because you need to book by the end of March. And Bhutan is a really different kind of journey. You just can't wander in there. They only give you a certain number of visas. I think there's 50,000 visas, so less than 1 million people have ever visited Bhutan. So it has to be organized in advance. There's only one flight in a day. There aren't a lot of hotels, so everything has to be pre-organized well in advance. So if you've been thinking about this, if you've been hearing me talk about it, if it's something that calls to you, please go to CypressHimalaya.com, CypressHimalaya.com. That is the tour company that is organizing this amazing experience, and you can learn more there and have your questions answered. So think about it. It's going to be just a small group of us, and it's going to be quite remarkable. So if you're ready for an adventure, this just might be the one. Hope to see you there. Okay, thanks so much for giving me the space to share that. And let's jump into the topic and my wonderful guest who's visiting with us today. So we're going to be exploring and navigating the wild, weird, and wonderful journey from conception through birth and beyond with my guest, Leslie Schrock. I just want to say that this show, What Women Must Know, has had the opportunity to explore many facets of health and healing. Some relate to the journey of women. Some have nothing to do with that at all. It's kind of what I am drawn to, what interests me, and what I think all my listeners would like to hear. So we have talked about many facets of women's health and women's journey through life. We've talked about menopause. We've talked about youthing. We've talked about PMS. We've talked about all those things, but we haven't really had a show that I can remember in recent history talking about the journey of birthing and from the very beginning, like from conception on down the line. And there's a lot to be said about what's happening in this day and age. So that's why we're excited to have Leslie on the show, and I just want to share a little bit about her before I invite her on. Leslie Schrock is an investor and entrepreneur with a decade of experience working at the intersection of health and technology. She helped grow Rock Health, a startup accelerator and venture fund, from an idea to a globally known firm with over 100 portfolio companies and more than $1 billion in funding. When she's not writing, Leslie spends her time with startups improving the way we live. Leslie was named one of the Fast Company's most creative people in business, and her work has been featured in publications including NPR, Time, GQ, Entrepreneur, Wired, and the New York Times. And she is the author of Bumpin', The Modern Guide to Pregnancy, and she lives in San Francisco with her husband and 8-month-old son, who's probably the inspiration for writing this book. So let me welcome Leslie to the show. Hello, Leslie.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
You're so welcome. You know, it's kind of funny, having a conversation about pregnancy with you, being this, entrepreneur and working in the tech industry, and here we are talking about women in pregnancy. Go ahead.
I think it's really important that, women like me with my background start to talk about this, because one of the big issues is that, no one does. Pregnancy can be this very hidden thing in the business world. And I think that's, it's about time for that to stop. So, which is why I'm really happy to share this, journey with so many people from so many backgrounds and, explore this conversation with you. And by the way, Bhutan is the number one place I'd like to visit. In a pre-baby world, I would be right there with you on that trip.
There are people taking their babies with them on these journeys. I have to say, I've seen amazing things, up in Machu Picchu and wherever, it doesn't stop a lot of couples, but I'm just saying, just saying.
I'll talk to my husband about it.
He might want to go back and experience his past lives. Who knows?
Oh, yeah. We've heard wonderful things. Anyway,
but thanks for saying that. I hope other people who are listening are really drawn to it, because it's truly profound. It's a truly profound place in the world. But anyway, the first question I want to ask you, Leslie, is the title of your book, Bumpin'. I mean, what is that about? Help me understand that title.
Well, it's a riff. The obvious answer is it's a riff on the baby bump. Like you've got a bump. It actually came up when I was researching the book. I spent a lot of time on different social media platforms and in forums and apps, and you cannot even imagine all of the different groups that I have been part of as research for this book, because I didn't want it to just reflect my questions and my experience. It also reflects kind of the collected wisdom of other parents, practitioners from many, many different backgrounds, and things. But, to be honest with you, the way the title for the book happened, I was looking around. Bumpin' was this, Instagram hashtag that I thought was really funny. A lot of people were starting to tag themselves as bumpin' when they were pregnant. And so I was talking to my husband out on a walk, a bit of a waddle at that point, I suppose. And I said, yeah, I want to have a title for this book that is, related, but also has kind of a feeling of levity and maybe could be interpreted a few different ways. So, the baby bump, there's also like road, bumps in the road that you hit through this process. And that's certainly a big focus of Bumpin', which is to say that no two journeys are the same. No two ways to, manage your pregnancy are identical, and there is no real right way, quote unquote. But really kind of also have a little bit of fun with it, because I think that we tend to, it's a very serious process. It is a life-altering process, but it also can be very fun. And I can tell you, having an 8-month-old now, every day is just kind of full of joy for us. There are easy times and hard times, but experiencing the world and being on this journey, especially, I'm 37 now. So a little later than perhaps was typical, years ago, but is more and more normal now. So, it's supposed to be a little fun. It's about that baby bump, but it's also about, there can be challenges and there are ways to overcome them.
Yeah, it's such a generational thing, because it's just like I mean, I know it's a common term to be using now, and when you go up to different sites and you hear all the celebrities talk about their baby bump, but it's like, well, that's
Yep.
just such a, it's like I never grew up with that term. That's just like a modern term, So
Yeah,
it's interesting it's referred to in that way. Anyway,
yeah.
I just had to ask. So tell us a little bit about your journey. And, you've come from a very successful career, and here you are writing a very comprehensive book. I mean, it's very comprehensive. It's like 350 pages, and there's a lot of information about all the facets of pregnancy from, as we said, from conception beyond. How did this come about in your journey?
So I would say the thing that has probably been common in all of my decisions in my career is finding an area or a problem or a question that I thought needed to be answered, and finding a way to answer that. And in the case of Bumpin', really, I was 35, I think, when I started trying to conceive. My husband and I, started our journey together, and we got pregnant the very first time we tried, which was crazy. And then I miscarried around 5-6 weeks. And it was shocking, because it was like, oh, this was so easy. And then all of a sudden, this thing that you dream of was just taken away. And it was, a real kind of moment for me where I had to just kind of step back and say, wow, I don't really have a lot of control in this process. I can do all these things. I can take good care of myself. But in the end, biology is biology and nature is nature. And so it really gave me some respect for my body. And then, those who have paged through the book know that I got pregnant a second time just 2 weeks later, because I had no idea that you're very fertile after a miscarriage. So, we weren't necessarily trying to do that, but we weren't necessarily being careful. And I was completely shocked because, as you said, my background is in health. I'm a very empowered user of healthcare, everything from, going and seeing my physician, telemedicine services, but also I'm a big fan of acupuncture. I've seen naturopaths. I'm very into integrated care between kind of Eastern and Western medicine. I think there's a lot we can learn from both. But I was just completely shocked at how little I knew. And I thought, well, if I don't know this, what is this like for other people who both, don't have access or who are going through this in a very different situation? So, really it was kind of after that second failed pregnancy, I took a break and I, retrenched a bit, and I said, wow, what can I learn? What answers are out here? I started doing the thing that I always do, which is, researching and reading everything I could. And at the end of that little excavation, I really came up a bit empty-handed, because for me, especially when it came to miscarriage, these books didn't address it really at all. And if they did, it was kind of buried at the end of the book. There was no information about, how do you know if you're having one? What do you do if you have one? How common is it actually? And so I kept coming up against these kinds of issues where I'd say, wow, we're talking about either too much stuff, really fringy kind of, issues that you would manage with your practitioner, whether it's a, doctor or a midwife, or these things that really don't matter. But we're not just kind of guiding someone through the whole process. And when I say the whole process, what I mean is, deciding that you want to have a child, to managing postpartum, which is a whole other thing that we should definitely unpack at some point. So really that's kind of where this came from, is I felt very disappointed at the way that we talk to pregnant women and families, the way that as a society we treat them and we provide resources, but then also, just the timbre of the conversation around, pregnancy and really what it's become. It's become this very adversarial thing with these different factions. So really my goal with Bumpin' is to say that, your journey is your own. Whatever you decide is right for you and your family is, probably the right decision. I'm giving you the latest clinical research that I can across, all kinds of different practices. And, it's really for you to decide what feels right for you.
Well, it's a lot of areas to cover. There's certainly so many facets of this. I wanted to ask you, what do you think contributed to your miscarriage?
My age. My age was probably, so it's estimated that about 80% of miscarriages happen due to chromosomal abnormalities, and the main reason that happens is egg quality. Again, we don't actually understand a lot about miscarriage. We don't even really know how often they happen. One estimate is 1 out of every 3 pregnancies. Oftentimes, most of the time, before a woman ever even knows she's pregnant, kind of in that 2-week wait for those who have, been through this process before. But, because we don't really understand a lot about fertility, even eggs haven't been studied the same way that, other cells in the body have. So I think it was probably my age. We went through that first pregnancy that ended in a miscarriage, and then our second wasn't viable actually due to a chromosomal abnormality. It wasn't growing, and it was, that was the worst experience of my life, which I'm actually happy to talk about. But, I believe that after all the research I've done, it was because of my age, because after you're 35, it's not like you can't get pregnant, your fertility doesn't fall off a cliff, but your egg quality does degrade year over year. And that is the majority of the time what leads to miscarriage.
So you were wanting to get pregnant at this stage of your life. Did you have a program in preparation for that? Were you making changes? Were you preparing before you even conceived?
Yeah, I think I did some things. I think I did what a lot of people end up doing, which is really trying to, eat a healthy diet. I really, tried to stop drinking too much coffee, dialing back caffeine, not drinking alcohol. I did do a preconception visit with my practitioner. So I actually did a lot of the things that I advocate for in the book, especially things that I found out a lot more about later. I also saw an acupuncturist before and during pregnancy, all 3 times I conceived, which I absolutely loved. I'm a big advocate of acupuncture. I think it's a really wonderful practice and a really nice complement to, any other kind of care that you want to have.
Yeah, that's, thanks for that, because the reason I ask that is primarily because in my experience, in our culture, we have become very disconnected from nature. And as a result, we, we kind of like to fit pregnancy into our busy schedule, so, okay, it's time to get pregnant and it's time to have a child, and we just carry on with work and everything and try to, also have this process going on. But in traditional cultures, it's such a different story. There's a time of preparation, there's a time of cleansing, there's a time of slowing down, especially for women being receptive, so they can bring this being in and be prepared on all these levels: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. And we're so far from that in our 21st century world, especially now that women have entered, so deeply into the workplace and live such a fast-paced life that we don't pay attention to our bodies. And on top of that, I just have to say, we can talk about this, and that's the role of the pill. So women have been on the pill, many of them since they've been teenagers, and they just stay on the pill without being told anything about the risks, about the complications, or about the deficiencies that are created by the pill. And in my book, Hormone Heresy, I will always remember this quote I found, to this day, even though I wrote that book many years ago, this has always stayed with me, and it was a quote from a multi-millionaire, maybe he's a billionaire by now, who made fertility drugs. And he said his best customers are women who were on the pill as teenagers and 20-year-olds. And these are the 30-year-olds and 40-year-olds now that are infertile and have to have the fertility drugs. And that was such a powerful sentence when I came across it, to understand what we're really doing to our bodies by taking these chemicals into our cells without really giving much thought to what they are. And I'm going to hand it over to you in a second, but in your book, I read a quote from, because it was the topic of the pill, I think, or being on the pill, and she said, I was on the pill for all these years, and my periods weren't very, dark, they were spotty, and I read that in horror, Leslie, because you don't have a period when you're on the pill. You have a forced bleed. There's nothing menstruation about it because the ovaries are shut off, and women haven't a clue of what's really going on in their bodies. So having said all that, I'm just going to hand it back over to you.
Well, I have actually two things to talk about there. So yes, I did not have a period for a very long time, and I did not know, if or when it was going to come back after that. And that was quite scary for me, because at the beginning of this, remember, mind you, I came into this not as, the kind of pregnancy expert I am now. I came into it as just, a person who has a background in healthcare, who spent a lot of time with different kinds of practitioners, who worked in the health industry for a long time, but, not a very experienced, user of healthcare services, like as a patient, because other than some gut issues, like I don't even have any cavities. So thinking about all of this just was not, really part of my life. And I was shocked. I did not really have any mood issues while I was pregnant. I mean, I guess you could ask my husband about that, but I think he'd back me up here. My biggest mood disruption actually was when I got off of the pill. It was crazy. It was like all of a sudden I was sensitive to everything, and I really felt a drop. So, that's not an area I've explored quite as much, but I can definitely tell you, I felt a big difference in my body when I got off the pill versus even, when I was pregnant. The other thing I wanted to touch on, though, that you said that I think is so interesting is, I've been working on a piece right now about, activity during pregnancy, whether or not it's a good idea, all of this stuff. And you mentioned connection to your body. And I actually just wanted to acknowledge that for me, pregnancy was this incredible gift. I have never been more connected to my body than I was during pregnancy, because really it forced me to kind of slow down. I've always been very active. I was a runner for years. I actually just really enjoy physical activity. I love hiking. I've been an athlete kind of my whole life. And all of a sudden you're pregnant and you kind of have to slow down and say, well, what does my body want and need? And really pay attention to that in a way that I certainly have never done as an adult. to my own detriment, but the gift that I have now post-pregnancy is that I still think I am more connected to my body than ever because I took that time to enjoy the process, to ask my body kind of what it wanted, what it needed in terms of activity, in terms of food, in terms of sleep, go with it. And then really on the exercise front, also pay attention to my form. So no matter what I was doing, I couldn't go at my normal pace because you've got like 50% more blood in your body and you're growing this tiny human. So I said, you know what? I'm going to try to do some of the same stuff that I do, but I'm going to slow down and I'm going to do everything with perfect form. And I'm going to absolutely feel it in the right part of my body. I'm not going to break any land speed records, and that's fine. And that's great. And you know what? I am probably stronger postpartum than I was when I came into pregnancy because I now do everything correctly. I don't go for speed. I go for what my body wants. So I have to say that that's probably been, other than my son, obviously, who's the greatest gift of this, I feel more deeply connected than ever to my body. And I would encourage other people who are going through this to kind of try to find the same peace.
Well, that's so profound because there is never more powerful time of being connected to the physical self as when you're pregnant. So you can be in your head, you can have a, developed intellect, you could be working with, your intellectual capacities, and most of us in our culture are very mental. We live in our heads a lot. It's very much part of how our culture operates. We give a lot of value to ideas and concepts and working, with that ability. But boy, when you are pregnant, you're observing your body. Your body's giving you the instructions of what it needs, and you really get to understand that deep connection with nature because you are now profoundly connected to these cycles of nature that's dictating what is required for this new life to come into the world.
Yep. Yeah. And it really, truly, I feel lucky every day that I took that time, even if I was busy or even if I was whatever, just to take a walk. I live near the Presidio in San Francisco, and I would go for long walks / waddles there. At some point in the process, it all becomes a waddle, but even just walking and noticing things and taking my time and not rushing and really choosing to enjoy that. And, there are lots of parts of pregnancy that are not so fun. I think anyone can tell you at some point sleep kind of goes out the window, because you can't get comfortable and you're peeing all the time and, maybe you don't feel so good. But really for me, the process of just kind of peeling away everything that I'd done before and just saying, okay, I'm not going to make any assumptions. I'm not going to force myself. I'm going to stop trying to live in my head about all of this, especially after going through 2 failed pregnancies, which I got a therapist after that. I am very good at eating my feelings normally, but I recognized that just wasn't something that I was going to be able to do and actually kind of, be able to enjoy that 3rd pregnancy that ended in my son. So, between this kind of, giving myself permission to really slow down, connect with my body, stretch, really, love my physical self, and then also kind of heal my mind from this really traumatic experience because, I don't know how many people out there have been through a miscarriage or have been through a failed pregnancy of any kind. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter when it happens, but it can feel like your grief has no bottom. And so, really, I can't say enough good things about, therapy. It's a thing that I talk about in Bumpin', which is, I think, mental health, preservation of and maintenance of mental health during conception, during pregnancy, in the postpartum period is really critical. So, I'm happy to stand up and tell everyone, I had a therapist during this process. It was one of the greatest things I did for myself. And I can't encourage it enough. There are lots of ways to access those services now. It doesn't have to be, $200 an hour laying on someone's couch talking about your mom. That's good if you want to do that. But, there's also telemedicine, there's tech support. So really, lots of different ways to access this care, but I just can't speak highly enough of how much that really helped me, even if it was just a short session here or there, or if it was by phone. It's a really great thing.
Especially after a loss. And there are so many
Yes.
hormones involved in this process. You're really feeling a lot very intensely.
Yes.
When you go through
Yes.
something like, I mean, even postpartum, all the hormones are shifting.
Oh, yeah.
After you give birth.
Oh,
right?
yeah, and your body. Oh.
Yeah,
the postpartum, the 4-day drop, it's crazy. You really feel it. 4 days after birth, it's like, whoa, what just happened? And it's very well documented, but really no one talks about it because the postpartum period might be the most mysterious of any parts of this process. I think we've pretty much documented pregnancy, and conception's getting a little more attention, but the quote unquote fourth trimester is really something that is, I feel strongly, needs to be discussed. Back in the days when we had cross-generational households, when we understood what pregnancy was, when we understood how it changed your body and your mind, and like the amount of responsibility and work it is to have a newborn, I think, we had a better understanding of it, but now our impression of the postpartum period is what we see on Instagram. These like unrealistic, bikinis a month after birth, or the Kardashians or whatever. And this is the narrative we have about what a postpartum body looks like, and what it is and what it has to be. And I think that that's another really grave disservice we're doing to women and families.
Absolutely. With traditional Chinese medicine, that postpartum period was so important for getting the mother to be rejuvenated. It's a huge demand on the body to be pregnant. It just draws on all this life force. And when you finish giving birth in that postpartum period, what's really required is to rejuvenate and regenerate the mother. And that was done in traditional cultures, and I'm thinking of traditional Chinese culture because I've studied Chinese medicine, but I'm sure it's true in just about any traditional culture. There's certain foods, there's certain herbs, there's certain periods of rest. There's just a whole other understanding and appreciation of how to regenerate these primary energies in a woman, because if they are not properly regenerated and built up this kidney chi, this life force, every time there's another pregnancy, you get more depleted, or even if there isn't any further pregnancies, just life will deplete you more and more. So it's not about hurry up and go back to work, or hurry up after you give birth and get back into the partying again, or the junk food, or whatever goes on in our life before we've been pregnant. It's a whole other different process that is not really understood nor appreciated. You probably found this as well in your research.
I did. I was really inspired by a lot of the traditions I saw, like the Chinese tradition of sitting in. South Korea, they have these postpartum spas, basically, where you go with your infant and you get help with breastfeeding and you are taken care of. It's a really interesting thing to see how many places in the rest of the world really take care of pregnant women after birth. The Kramzorg in the Netherlands, it's, the NHS will send a nurse to your house. So I think that, two things that hearten me in this area actually are, doulas, and also the resurgence of midwives in obstetrical care. So I think, we're starting to see midwives more integrated back into the medical system, even if you choose a hospital birth. I had a midwife present at my birth. I had a team of doulas, which was amazing. I can't say enough good things about the rise of doulas. I think it's an incredible thing. I hope insurance and other vehicles will be available to women from all backgrounds to have a birth supporter present for them. But really, this is kind of something we're starting to see more of from those two specialties, which is thinking about this postpartum period as being just as important in many ways as what happens during pregnancy, because as anyone has done the breastfeeding thing can tell you, it is a lot of work, and it takes hydration, it takes eating the right things, it takes rest, it takes a lot to feed that baby from your body. And really, we don't have, like right now, a typical experience is, you go to the hospital, you give birth, and then you're discharged and you're sent home, and there's no instruction manual. Like, it's harder to drive a car than it is to have a baby. There's no license for having a baby, and we don't support parents in those first weeks postpartum when it's really, really tough, when a woman's body is just healing. So I think, midwives, some of whom do home visits, it's not really common yet, but it's happening more. But I think doulas especially are a huge opportunity and really positive move in this direction, because that is a thing that they do. They're there before birth. They're there to coach you through the experience of childbirth, and then they're there afterwards for a visit or two. And many of them can help with lactation. So they're not medical professionals. Think of them more as emotional supporters and coaches. So yes, this country has some real work to do compared to the rest of the planet in terms of supporting, the post-birth body and families. But I do think that, if this is an area of interest for you, that spending some time looking into the services of doulas is really wonderful.
What is the definition of a doula?
So somebody said this to me one time, and I think it's kind of the perfect description. So a midwife or a doctor takes care of you from the waist down, and a doula takes care of you from the waist up. So, doctors, you generally don't have very long appointments with OBs, and there are lots of things to kind of unpack about the state of obstetrics right now as well. The extreme rates of OB burnout, how hard that profession is. But, it's a time and a money thing. With that, doulas really are there for emotional support. So it literally means women's servant. So they're there they can teach birth classes. They kind of work with you and your partner on, non-medicated childbirth, like pain relief. So, massage techniques, using water, aromatherapy. It can be lots and lots of things that there is clinical research that supports that all of these things can help, that if you incorporate some of these non-medicated interventions into your birth, that you're less likely to need any kind of, other intervention, even if that's an epidural, or progress to needing a C-section. But a lot of this has really great, potential to change the way that whole experience is put on.
I just had to smile, Leslie, at what you said. There's about a lot of clinical research to the value of doulas. It's like, yeah, that's kind of a blinding flash of the obvious. It's like,
I agree.
We it's not the clinical research we need. It's just it's just common sense when you are supported in a process, especially if it's your first pregnancy. It's like going into a totally foreign land. You don't have any reference points for it. So if you can support a couple physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, it's going to support a healthy pregnancy and support the likelihood of having a healthy birth as well. It's like we don't need research on this,
But we do need research in order for insurance to pay for it, because unfortunately the system that we live with, I'm with you. It's very obvious. Like when I sit and say these things, I think to myself, did I really even need to say that out loud? Of course, if you're supported during birth, the experience of birth is going to be more positive. Like, duh. Of course it is. However, insurance does not pay for doulas, which I think is absolutely crazy. If we know that the birth outcomes and complications are lower with the presence of, this person, why are we not making this a standard of care? Why are we not offering this to, everyone, regardless of, income level or, New York State's doing some interesting pilots with that. But, yes, it is obvious, but unfortunately our system requires that you have proof that things work. And that's where the clinical guidelines come from. Trust me.
So tell me, are we making progress with getting insurance to cover this? Is it cost effective to have a doula?
You know, it really depends where you live. For a couple, is it cost effective? It's going to be an out-of-pocket cost for most people, and it can be anywhere from, and it really depends on the doula, and it depends exactly what they do and how many visits are involved and all of that. But it can be anywhere from, you know, $400 upwards of over $2,000 to have this person be present for you, to have someone who's really well trained and who has been through enough births to be of real value. But yeah, I do think that we're making progress on this. The number of doulas that are involved in births has more than doubled in the last decade. I think that the main barrier for people, though, is like, I mean, having a kid is expensive. Like, take the doula out of it. It's really expensive between medical care, buying stuff for the baby, you know, maternity clothes, all of this. And I actually wrote a chapter in Bumpin' about this specifically because I realized we're so obsessed with like the perfect nursery and like, oh my God, these maternity clothes. And I should honestly like save your money on the things that are temporary and focus on getting the care that you need to be supported and to have, you know, a really positive birth experience. I think spending money on our doulas was absolutely the best money that we spent during pregnancy, period. Like, absolutely the best. I felt, you know, they were wonderful people. Hi, Malia and Heather. We love you. You know, they were absolutely incredible. And I don't know. I mean, I had a very complicated birth also. I should add, for anyone who has not read my book, I detail it all. So you can get the hairy details if you want them. But, you know, I look back at that process and I think, oh my gosh, and what would we have done without these people? And we had access to a world-class hospital. We had great medical care. We had a midwife present. We had all of these things. But, you know, for our birth, like everything went kind of sideways. And, you know, it didn't end the way I wanted it to. It ended in a C-section. But I tried everything else. You know, I had like a fully intervention-free birth for quite some time, and only at the point at which things were getting a little dire did I, you know, finally relent and get an epidural. And then finally, you know, we had to make the call to get a C-section. But, you know, my doula was there for my C-section. So it was a really cool thing. But I'm actually actively trying to have conversations with insurers and employers and other groups right now. I'm actually doing a couple things in March to support this, but I think it's an absolutely essential, important, and, you know, critical conversation that we have kind of as a country about, you know, supporting families during the birthing process and afterwards.
That's wonderful news. That, you know, just might be one of the bigger purposes for everything that you've been through and your influence in the industry, right? So that you have credibility to help bring about some of these changes, you know, because we've lost the support of the family. Did you have family who lived in San Francisco area?
No, we don't.
Yeah.
We don't have any family. Our families are wonderful. They come visit, but we don't have family here locally, no.
Yeah, so it's like that network that we used to have to support pregnant women before, during, after is not there. So we need to find other ways that we can get that support, because it's all part of this profound process of giving life, you know, into the world. And it you know, needs to be on so many levels to support the baby, the mom, dad. I want to change topic a little bit. Well, I want to change topic a lot. Let's talk about the growing rates of infertility, because infertility rates are dropping around the world. The United States is having a problem with infertility and with low birth rates, and as is Europe, as is Australia. There are these low birth rates going on all over the world now. So what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I have many thoughts on this topic. Obviously, having done all this research, I think that one area that I personally felt was not spoken about at all So, you read a book about pregnancy and it's kind of a collection of symptoms and how to manage them and morning sickness and this and that. But no one really talks to you about how to manage this experience in your relationship, and then also financial planning. So, since we've spent a lot of time on health, I want to just briefly touch on the fact that, I don't think that we do a good job of preparing families for the financial side of childbirth. Something like 45% of pregnancies aren't planned. And if that is you still have time. You can definitely make everything work. But if you are going into this process with the intention of getting pregnant and you are, over 35, which is, I think one reason that fertility rates are changing because women are waiting longer to have babies, you should be thinking about creating a budget for childcare, for medical costs, for all of this stuff. And that is something that I tackle in Bumpin', which is, this isn't just a process that involves your body and your mind. It also involves everything else in your life. It involves, returning and leaving work. I mean, over half of the workforce is now women. We don't talk about how to navigate that. We don't talk about breastfeeding as it relates to work, which really breastfeeding at work is, pumping. It's not breastfeeding. They're very different. So I think really to me, there is no one cause for the lower birth rates and infertility. I think it's a whole collection of things. But I think part of the issue is that we, have made it very expensive to have a family in this country, very difficult for families that need two incomes, very difficult to make decisions about childcare. Childcare is extremely expensive. We don't have paid leave. And I think younger generations, are seeing this and saying, well, is it worth it? And that's a big question for them. So I think it's a whole mix of things, really. I can't really tie it or peg it to one thing. I think it depends where you live. I think it depends what your circumstances are, your age, your health. There's, obviously a huge rise in chronic conditions and comorbidities that is contributing to people having more complicated pregnancies, high-risk pregnancies. So, there's a lot of work to do in the healthcare system. And frankly, we could have an entire hour just talking about that, which I'm happy to come back and do.
Right. It is a big topic. And it is a topic because there are so many women who are in their 40s now and want to have a family, but it becomes a really difficult thing for many women for so many reasons why they either cannot conceive or why they miscarry. And it's a tough call for so many women because they just get so upset that they waited so long, which is often a problem, And there was a TED Talk I watched recently of a woman talking about this very thing, and she was in her 40s and, successful at work and decided she finally wanted to get pregnant and, had miscarriages and had fertility treatments and then more fertility treatments and more huge amounts of money. And I think somewhere miraculously at the age of 45, after getting all these fertility treatments, she conceived and she carried her child full term. But boy, that's hard on the body at 45.
It is. Well, it's hard on the body and it's hard on the finances. I mean, this is also just not something that is accessible for most families in America. Going through multiple fertility treatments, a lot of time it's not paid for by insurance, or your employer or whatever. It takes time off. It's very emotional. It's very hormonally, it's a hormonal roller coaster. So, we definitely are seeing a rise in the average age of first-time mothers. In San Francisco and New York, it's 33, close to 33. And then the rest of the country, it's 27, which is a big rise. In the early 80s, when one of the most famous pregnancy books was written, the average age of first-time mothers was 23. The difference between 23 and 27 is quite a bit. And the difference between, that and 33 It's a big change. So you're talking about women who have been working for a long time, for over a decade, who are established in their careers. You know, it's a very different proposition doing it when you're in your mid to late 30s or even your early 40s. But I think that's also why we've seen a huge rise in, you know, egg freezing technologies, different kinds of cryopreservation. It's a really interesting time with all of this, because I think, as with anything, you know, when there's a need, someone is going to come fill it with a business or startup or something that helps you, you know, have the life you want or create the life you want in this case.
You know, I can really appreciate women who are wanting to put off getting pregnant, and they freeze their eggs and, you know, have them for the future. But from my understanding, from a more spiritual way of looking at bringing a new soul into the world, and you know, having this experience of a loving, being in a loving energy and having a strong loving intention, you know, as part of the process of conception. You know, what's so interesting, Lizzie, I don't know if you've come across this in your research, but it's a little on the side, but it's the egg that actually goes out and lassos and chooses which sperm she wants to be impregnated by. Did you know that?
I have not heard that, no.
That's such a profound thought, isn't it? I mean, it's so profound.
It is a profound thought.
So when we mechanize this, you know, freezing of eggs, and we just think of it as this biochemical process and just insert a sperm, but it's like we in our culture are missing a deep and profound facet of what really is necessary to create a human being.
And I think that goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, right? Which is that, you know, it's so difficult in today's world when you feel the, you know, responsibility of work and your relationship and your friendships and, you know, all of these other things, your family, you know, and trying to kind of shoehorn in having you know, creating a new life without really thinking through fully what that means and being prepared for what that means. And because we're not around our families, because we're not exposed to this whole journey in the same ways that we used to be, you know, even a generation ago, I think it takes a lot of people by surprise, and I count myself in this pool. I think I was surprised by the number of things that I just didn't think about and I just didn't consider, and how humbling this process would be for me as well, because, oh my gosh, it was the most, I think, physically humbling, mentally humbling thing I've ever gone through. So, you know, I think that when we talk about this process, you know, we make it into sunshine and puppies and, oh my God, you're glowing, and oh my God, isn't this great? You're bringing a baby into the world. And instead, we really need to talk about, you know, well, if you're going to do this, this is what it means. This is what it's really like. These are the things that can go wrong, and they do go wrong for lots of people. And if they do, if you have a miscarriage, not your fault. It's biology. It's you know, it's nothing you could have helped. And really going into it with, you know, if you are going into the pregnancy with, you know, with pre-planning, that it is an experience that really gives you the opportunity to kind of have a hard reset and connect with your body and connect with your relationship, connect with your life, and slow down a little bit if you're able to do that. It's just the unfortunate reality for many families in this country is that they can't because of their work, because workplaces are not friendly to pregnancy still, or breastfeeding, or anything else really. So, you know, we are, I think, the only developed country without any kind of parental leave, federal paid parental leave. So, you know, it's so many factors that come together. It's why talking about these issues, you know, like we could spend another 3 hours on this topic together, and I think we would still be finding reasons that it's difficult. But, you know, I would just urge people to go into it with openness and try not to judge each other and be kind, because it's another thing I think we've really lost is that, this is not an easy process for anyone. As easy as it is for you, it's going to be hard for someone else. And looking at that person, I think like a lot of what's happened to Meghan Markle in the news, for example, I think is very indicative of this. Like she goes for a hike in some park, and I just saw this the other day. I guess, she and Prince Harry moved to Canada, and she's in some park, and she's got her baby carrier on, and she's out for a walk with her dogs. And the whole internet piles on and says, oh, my God, look at that baby. Like, he's not in that carrier right, and blah, 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 blah. And, no one can just leave it alone, like, and have a moment of kindness. Like, I'm pretty sure the baby's okay. So, I think that's another thing, is that instead of, all of us feeling this compulsion to like correct people and, be judgmental and tell them how you have to do it, just accepting the fact that this journey is so different for everyone. The choices you make, your unique body, your unique pregnancy, your eventual baby, and that there is no kind of one size fits all solution to this. So that's really, another thing that's clear to me is the world needs a bit more kindness at this moment, especially for new parents.
Especially for new parents, that's such a healing energy that we need to give to new parents. And there really isn't a roadmap. I mean, everyone goes through their own journey with this, as you said. And, and in your case, little did you know that your birth was going to have complications associated with it. Everyone wants this beautiful experience, but it is what it is.
Yeah. Yep.
So it's being supported, and it's being supported. The most important thing is being supported when things
Absolutely.
are going other than plan, right? So we can work with whatever.
Yeah, well, that's another thing, the whole idea of planning your birth. It's not really a thing. You can have preferences. You can have things that you'd like to do. You can try your best. I mean, I was in labor for 65 hours before I finally, my son was cut out because my kidneys were failing. So I really had no choice in the process. But instead of looking at it as some kind of, failure as an entry into motherhood, I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful that my son and I both would have died. He was stuck. There was no way he was coming out on his own. I have an inadequate pelvis, apparently, for a baby with a head size that large. So, I was unmedicated for a very long time and, did everything I could. But I think I've read other stories from people that are like, I'm so devastated. This happened. It wasn't what I planned. And I think what I had to step back and say was like, I had to give myself the grace and say, I did everything I could. I tried my best. I don't think anyone could have tried anything else. And at the end, we're both healthy. We're both great. He's thriving. So it's very hard for me to feel anything other than gratitude that we're both here and healthy.
And that's the bottom line. That's the bottom line. So, Leslie, we've come to the end of our time, but I want to make sure people know how to get hold of your book. Do you have a website that you'd like to refer people to, or?
Yeah, well, so you can find me at leslieschrock.com, but that's kind of hard to spell. So I actually have bumpin.com, bumpin.com. And if you visit that site, right now you can, connect with the book. You can connect with me. I'd love to hear from people who have read the book, hear your thoughts, hear your feedback. But I'm also going to be releasing some resources for, people trying to conceive, new parents, all of that. So it's really going to kind of become a home for a lot of the things that I've discovered even since writing this book. A more evergreen guide to accessing some of these complementary practices and different different products and services and all of that. So bumpin.com, bumpin.com.
Oh, that's great. Well, you will have a wealth of information and resources to share because it's just a huge topic, right? So much to offer people. It's great. It's great that you're providing you're becoming a resource to support that process for people. So
Absolutely.
It's a pleasure to have you on the show. Leslie, we've come to the end. I got to go, but I just wish you all the best, and you're really making a difference out there in the world. So thanks for your commitment. You're so welcome. And
thank you for doing the work on this show.
You're so welcome. And thank you, everyone. And remember, always honor the wisdom of your feminine self. Bye till next time.